Welcome to the Regen Brands podcast. This is a place for brands, retailers, investors, and other food system stakeholders to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. This is your host, Kyle, joined by my co-host, AC, who's going to take us into the episode.
On this episode, we have Loren Poncia, who is a rancher and the owner at Stemple Creek Ranch. Stemple Creek is supporting regenerative agriculture with their regeneratively raised beef, lamb, pork, and chicken products, mainly sold via their website directly to consumers and also available via select farmers markets, restaurants, and retailers. Stemple Creek's home ranch in Northern California stretches over more than 1,000 acres, and their overall operation manages more than 8,000 acres of land. In this episode, Loren details the family's journey from conventional dairy to regenerative beef production, why they ended up starting a brand even though he never wanted to be in the meat business, and how they've grown to a multi-million-dollar regional brand over the past decade. Stemple Creek's commitment to honesty, transparency, and quality was very apparent as Loren shared the story of managing their ranch, developing their brand, and growing their business. He shared his 3 keys to cracking the code on premium quality and taste in grass-fed beef, how their brand is approaching regenerative certification, and the challenges of maintaining a fresh meat program year-round. Plus, so much more. Loren is an epic storyteller and full of great wisdom. We hope you enjoyed this one as much as we did. Let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Regen Brands podcast. Very excited today to have our friend Loren from Stemple Creek Ranch joining us. So welcome, Loren.
Hey, thanks, guys. I'm excited to be here.
We're stoked to have you here. You wouldn't be here if it weren't for the help of Avery, daughter, technical support assistant. So
Shout out to Avery.
Well, we're here. We're recording, and we're excited to dig in. For our listeners who are not familiar with Stemple Creek, give us a quick lay of the land. What sort of products do you produce? Where can people find Stemple Creek products today?
So we're a small family business. We're in Northwest Marin County is the main ranch. We do beef, lamb, pork, and a small amount of chicken, all grass-fed, grass-finished, except for the pork and the chicken actually eat some grains out on pastures. And most of our business is direct to consumer via internet, our website, farmers markets, or there's about 5 or 6, 10 local retailers and restaurants here in the Bay Area.
Super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I want to say, I saw something I was shopping on Amazon or Whole Foods and I saw some Stemple Creek jerky or something lately, Loren. So have you guys broadened the retail footprint in California?
Yeah, we do. We do sell our jerky and our beef sticks on Amazon as well. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I saw then.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, man, we're excited to have you. Loren and I met 2 or 3 Expo West ago and just great energy. It's always fun hanging out with you. And I think, Loren, you're doing some really cool stuff. 4th generation ranch. We're working with 1,000+ acres. And we always like to tell these stories of we can do this at scale. And I think you get touted a lot as somebody that's doing it well and really the right way. And there's some cool, videography and photography out there in the internet that proves that. So we're excited to have you tell that story from a ranching perspective, but also share with us how you'll have grown the business and the brand over time as well. But before we unpack all that, just back this up for us. I mean, this thing's been going on for 4 generations. Give us the family history, the story of the ranch itself, and how we got here today.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'm actually the 4th generation, like you say. My great-grandfather immigrated from Garzano, Italy, 1897 through Ellis Island, with his intent on ending up on the ranch where we're at right now, which is pretty wild. We've been doing this for 120 plus years. And what's crazy about it is our business now is more like his business back then than the middle generations, because we have a direct to consumer relationship. And there's been this renaissance in agriculture where people want to know where their food is coming from. And we live here in the Bay Area where there's a lot of people that want to know where that is. So, but back then he was diversified. He had chicken, beef, poultry, milk, potatoes, all those kinds of things. And then the middle generations were mostly mono-type farms where we did dairy up until 1989. And I grew up on the dairy. I loved the dairy. I never wanted to leave the ranch. Hunter, fisher, gatherer, outdoorsman. I never wanted to
Yeah.
leave the ranch. And my parents said, "Hey, you need to go to college." I'm like, why would I go to college? This is amazing. This is amazing here. So anyway, I kicking and screaming went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Absolutely loved it. After the first quarter, I was like, I know why I went to college. Met some amazing people around the country. And every summer I'd come home and I'd work on the ranch, and I thought for sure I was coming home to be a full-time rancher. About my junior year, I got into the numbers, the economic numbers with my parents, and realized there was not opportunity for me to come home and be a rancher. So this is the craziest part of the story, and I'm not sure if I've ever even told you guys this. So I went to work in corporate America. My friends were like, "Hey, you'd be great at sales." So I started selling veterinary pharmaceuticals, and I went to work for Monsanto selling BST for dairy cows. Yeah, exactly. And it was unbelievable education, the most amazing education ever. And I met some just amazing people from all over the world. I lived in Texas, Florida, Georgia, and then back to California. And when I was doing that, working for these big companies selling veterinary pharmaceuticals, I realized it wasn't my long-term goal. I needed to get back to the ranch and try and make it a real business. So me and my wife were living in Sacramento, and right around my 30th birthday, I just turned 50, so this is 20 years ago. I came home one day and said, "Hey, Lisa, we have to move back to the ranch and try and make this a real business, but we can't just, I don't ever want to wonder what would have happened. I want to go out and try. And if we fail, that's fine, but we have to at least try." And she said, yes, thankfully. So we had a meeting with my parents. We said, "Hey, Mom and Dad, we want to come home. We want to do this, but quite frankly, we don't want to do it with you. We want to buy your cattle and lease your land." And they said yes. So that started the ball rolling. We came home. We did that for 3 years, very conventionally. Like we'd raise cattle. We'd sell the whole load of cattle once a year. We'd be a price taker, get whatever we could get. And we realized that was not very good financially for us, and we weren't going to be able to stay in business if we kept doing that. Around the same time, I read the book, The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan, and I was like, this is amazing. We live right here in the Bay Area. I need to actually, create a brand and sell food to the Bay Area. So we started doing that. We had more and more people asking us for our products. And we came up with a 5-page website. And the week that my daughter was born, it went live. We started getting orders from people we'd never met before in the Central Valley of California and LA. And we're like, wow, this is kind of cool. Why we both still had our day jobs, so Lisa and I both were still doing our day jobs. And we did that for about 5 or 6 years where we built the business, and I still traveled, still did different pharmaceutical company. I went and switched over to pets, and I did pet medicine. And we did that for years to the point where it was like we had no downtime. It was like we need to change something. So 12 or 13 years ago in November, I quit my day job, went all in Stemple, and we've grown the business by about 15 times since that's happened. So it's been fun. This is my full-time gig now. We raise about 2,000 beef cattle a year, about 1,000 lambs, about 400 pigs, and a few thousand chickens through a partner. And we sell all of that. We don't have distributors. We do it mostly ourselves. And it's been awesome. It's been fun.
Well, I super appreciate the story. I really want there to be like a feature film on your great grandfather's journey from like Italy, wanting to get to this one place in California, like what that all went through, him starting the farm. That'd be incredible. But I also really appreciate the Omnivore's Dilemma portion of the story and how that helped you to pivot your business to, instead of going, we're just going to sell at auction, to like, hey, we want to establish a relationship with our customers. I also want to understand, what was the trigger point, moment of learning that got you into regenerative versus more conventional? So like, what was the learning point? And then how did you start to implement those systems on the farm?
Yeah, what's really interesting there about the whole regenerative portion is when we first started the business, we got the whole ranch certified organic, and we were selling.
And this is when you and your wife took over.
When me and my wife took over 20 years ago, we got the whole ranch certified organic, and we started rotational grazing. Didn't really know why or how or what we were doing, but my dad I knew that it was the right thing to do because we grew more grass when we did that. And so it
Yeah.
started out as economics. It wasn't about like biodiversity and soil carbon and all those things. I've kind of learned those through the years, but it was about like, okay, we're going to grow more grass if we do this. And I'll talk a little bit more about this, but it's like a dance with Mother Nature, and that's kind of what we do. Is it's a dance. Every year is different. That's what makes it exciting. But my dad was very conventional. Like he had 20 cows in every field, and so we would all wintertime we would drive out there and we'd feed them hay, and then we'd drive back, and we'd do that like every day, 7 days a week. And I was like, man, there has to be an easier way. So I started just putting the cattle together. My dad was already really progressive in our area in terms of creating more habitat, fencing off the creeks, taking care of the riparian areas, planting trees. And I followed in his leadership with that and combined that with our rotational grazing. And then ultimately, we were certified organic. We were GAP 4. We were selling whole loads of cattle to Panorama, who was selling them to Whole Foods. And it actually worked out well for us. But we realized that, within a few years, that price was going to go down, 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 down. And we couldn't afford to stay in business. So we needed to sell all of that through our own brand to people that really wanted to support us directly, where there was not really a middleman in the picture. So that's what kind of got Regenerative. Was like, we've been doing Regenerative for like 30 years. We just didn't call it Regenerative. We've been doing this dance for 30 years, and now it's a buzzword, and it's important, really important, to get more people to do these practices. But it wasn't like we changed everything to become regenerative. We were like one of the OG regenerative back when. So
two random questions on when you just had started, when you just first launched the website and you had some initial orders come in, Loren. Were you shipping product? Because I'm sure the infrastructure to ship frozen meat was like way different, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Were you guys did you have a delivery van? And why were people buying? Were they just buying it because it was local and they knew who you were? Did you have any of these regenerative or sustainable claims? Was it grass-fed, grass-finished? I'm just so curious at that very early stage, what the customer and fulfillment journey look like.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So and it's fun to think back on it. What we did originally was I was line in the sand. I do not want to be in the meat business. I just want to sell all of our cattle direct to people.
Look at you now, brother.
I know. Yeah. So what happened was
real quick, what was the aversion? Why did you not want to be in the meat business?
Because it was all new to me. I didn't know it. It's and it's something that we can talk about. Is there's so many people that want to do this, that are ranchers that want to do this. So I don't discourage them. I encourage them, but I say this is a different business. So you have to go into it with a different mindset. You need a different vision and a different mission, and you need a marketing support, and you need inventory systems, and you need all of these things that are not intuitive to ranchers. They're intuitive to marketing people or salespeople or inventory people or warehouse people or systems thinkers. And so it's a whole different, they're multiple businesses. Now, when you look at our family business and what Lisa and I've created, we have 15 enterprises, and each enterprise has to be able to pay for itself, or we shouldn't be doing that enterprise. So we're actually looking at it from the top down like it's real business. But we first started by selling quarter beef, half beef, whole beef. So somebody would send us a check when we got check for a quarter beef. When we got 4 checks, we would harvest the beef. They would go pick it up at the butcher. And that's how it started. And then
this is the origin of DTC. I love it.
Yeah. And then people were saying, oh my God, that's the best beef we've ever had. Or, oh my God, that's the best lamb we've ever had. And this is actually probably one of the most pivot points in our business to give us brand exposure. This was not that long ago, which is crazy. It was 15 years ago. Somebody sent us a newspaper clipping article in the Contra Costa Times that said, local butcher shop opening in East Bay, Chez Panisse chef. And they sent it to us because they loved our lamb so much. And they said, you should check these guys out. So Lisa, my wife, called them. And it was Aaron Ricchino, who used to be a chef at Chez. And he said, yeah, I'd love to come see your ranch. They came out, we barbecued. Exact same thing we do today when chefs come over. It's just we show them the whole thing. We give them a ranch tour, look at the cattle, cook some meat together, maybe drink a little wine, have a great time. And And he opened with our product. So we went from being this little podunk ranch in Tamales that nobody knew about to all of a sudden being on the Chez Panisse menu a week later, like 2 years into our brand. And then other people were saying, who's this Stemple Creek? And then the Chez Panisse community supports Alice and everything. And, most of the restaurants that we work with now have some tie to a chef that worked at Chez Panisse or, had that connection. So that kind of helped us get exposure really quickly. And it was kind of, if you show up, good things happen. And that's kind of what we did. The other thing is Lisa's really smart. And when we said I want to have a brand, we said we want it to be a nice brand, not like a janky website that like you go and look at a lot of ranchers like us. And it's like the website doesn't work. It's got like, different fonts and stuff. We want it to be like, wow, like Disneyland. Wow factor. So Lisa really worked on that to create that and to create our brand. Like we did all of this ourselves. And it's been fun. It's kind of crazy actually when we look back and see how we started. I had a younger rancher that I'm kind of mentoring right now asked me last week, said, when you started, is this what you wanted? And I was like, hell no. When I started, I wanted to sell all the animals that we raised on our ranch just to be able to survive to do it the next year. And now it's grown and grown and grown. And we now we started with 400 acres. Now we manage about 8,000 acres. We are far from big in this community. Like we're still a very tiny business. But when you look at our growth trajectory, we've grown. We started with 10,000 in sales and we just broke 10 million this year. So it's been good, but it's been slow and steady.
Man.
Yeah. It's been slow.
Hell yeah.
Incredible. I used to buy popcorn from a very non-complicated internet system like you described. Like where you go on the site, it's like, I don't know, if someone's just stealing my credit card information or am I buying popcorn? I'm not sure. So I love that you guys went in with like, hey, let's make this look legit and feel legit. I want to circle back to some of the agronomics because you guys said you do cattle, lamb, pork, and chicken. And I want to understand, are those all separate systems where they have their own like rotational grazing patterns, like just the cattle are in, this acreage, just the lamb are in this acreage? Or is there like a specific follow along, like the cattle go first, the acreage rests, then the lamb come on, then it rests, then the pork, or, what does all of that look like?
So this has all I've been adapting and changing through the years with lots of different consultants that you've probably had on the show and different learning. But we used to have mama cows we'd have the mama cows in one group that would go around on our main ranch. And then we had the yearlings, we'd keep those calves over and we'd have them. And then we had the sheep, they were set stocked in a certain area. And what we realized pretty quickly about maybe 6-7 years ago is in order to meet our economic goals and have a consistent product, we leased a lot of land in other places, like poor land, like steep hills that you can hardly walk on and stuff. And we put the mama cows there and we rotate them around. But it's more of a set stock, honestly, than it is an intense grazing because you can't even drive or ride a horse on some of this ground. Right. And they eat brush and poison oak and whatever they can get. They don't get any supplemental feed at all. And then our main ranch, which is beautiful rolling hills, which you'll see mostly on our website probably, is super lush and green. And it's the best feed that we can grow anywhere. So we want to put that feed through anything that's getting finished. So around home, the main ranch, which we call the headquarters, we don't have mama cows or baby calves or any of that thing. They're all on the peripheral ranches. And then once the calves are weaned, we bring them home and we start the rotational program. The sheep, this is all real life stuff, right? So the sheep used to rotate more behind the cows. Now there's 5 pastures that the sheep rotate through. And it's because we have a really bad coyote problem. And if we don't have the fields fenced correctly, the guardian dogs get out of the fence. So, and the coyotes get in. So we have 5 fields, the cattle and the sheep go together. But there was a point in time, maybe 3 years ago, that the cattle and the sheep would follow each other, but they wouldn't be in the same field at the same time because our guardian dogs chased the cattle. And they were like, oh, get away from my sheep. And then you don't have fat cattle when the guardian dogs are chasing them around in circles all day. So the sheep became its own enterprise. The cattle became its own enterprise. They do graze in the same pastures, but it's not this intense, perfect system that's like, oh, one day here, one day here, one day here. But it is the dance that we've been talking about is we will have certain times of the year, especially like right now, in the last 3 days, we've had 4 or 5 inches of rain. If we rotate big groups of cattle, we are going to create tons of mud and do ecological harm, not good. So we have the cattle, all the finishing cattle are on a huge pile of wood chips that's like probably 3 acres big. And we're feeding them hay and alfalfa on that pile of wood chips. But then they have like a 40-acre pasture that they're eating green grass too, so they can come off the wood chips and do that. But at the same time, they're making compost with those wood chips because they're pooping and peeing and eating. The majority of their diet this time of year comes from the hay that we're feeding them to have a fresh product. It's a big challenge, though. It's a big bottleneck for our industry is having a fresh product year round, which we do. And if I could just snap my fingers, we would not. We would harvest everything at the peak season and sell it frozen. So it's a big education piece for us and for people like you to help educate consumers and businesses that maybe a frozen is not that bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think frozen meat is great, but I also really like the real world examples that you shared. I think it's the first time somebody's mentioned a coyote problem with lamb, so that's really interesting to think about and how the level of complexity that adds. Throw in the dogs who then chase the cow, who then ruin the quality of the product, the yield off the cattle, right? So I super appreciate that example and the rain, the fact that you've got to take the cattle off, the pasture during the rain. And how you're still utilizing that opportunity to create compost. I think that's a really, really cool solution. So appreciate the share. I don't really have any follow-up questions. I just really like learning out loud.
Yeah, well, you got to come see it. You got to come see it with your own eyes. Or
count me in, man. We're gonna do a road show here one of these days. Maybe take a couple weeks and just hit all the farms.
NorCal is like the hot spot. Like
it really
we definitely have like a nice density we can hit in NorCal.
If I can, I'll give you like another 2-minute summary of like all the enterprises that we have on the business. Because I think it's really important. I think it's really important for consumers and other brands to understand that it's a very marginal business, agriculture, and it's very capital intense. And Lisa and I have done some really cool things. Like we bought the ranch next door from my family's ranch in Marin County, and people well, how can you buy a ranch next door, unless for millions of dollars, unless you're rich? And we bought it when we were 30, maybe 35. We were not rich, and we're still not rich, but the way that we bought it was trying to figure out how do you solve for a problem instead of just being like, oh, we can't do it. Don't tell me how we can't do it. Tell me how we can do it. And we figured it out that we bought this place. The owner financed it. He really wanted us to have it. He still financed it to this day. And then we took all the little buildings there on the property and we converted them into revenue generating things. So we have 4 farm stays on the ranch. That's its own business, and a big barn we call it the party barn or the event barn. And we do 15 or 20 weddings a year. And every one of those weddings and every one of those farm stays helps this brand grow because people come there like, oh, Stemple Creek, and they eat the good meat and they breathe the fresh air and they see all the bird life and they meet us and they just know it's like true authenticity, and it's 56 miles from the Golden Gate Bridge. And so it's a real marketing advantage, frankly, compared to some other brands. It's like we're right here. We get lots of media exposure because we're close to the city. We share with it. It's a really unique spot. It's just, it's awesome. So there's those enterprises. Then there's cattle, sheep, pigs, mama cows, yearlings, finishers, honey, hay, custom grazing. We have all these different enterprises. Maybe only one of them makes $1,000 a year, but one of them might make $100,000 a year. And they're all part of the story that makes it special and unique and authentic. So
the dancing metaphor is with Mother Nature and also with the spreadsheet and the P&L. I can tell. So you're doing a lot of dancing.
We're trying.
Two questions, Loren. One is talk to us about how you've cracked the code on grass-fed, grass-finished flavor. Is that a genetics thing? Is it a management thing? How have you really done that? Because these really nice restaurants in San Francisco have been a huge boon to your business, and they wouldn't do that unless the meat was really good. So we'd love to hear you speak to that. And then I do want to double back to the seasonality and just have you unpack that for the layman of like, why is that a challenge? What are you talking about there? So, cracking the code on, grass-fed, grass-finished, and that seasonality piece.
So the code on grass-fed, grass-finished is we're still working on it, but we're doing a pretty good job. Like we still have variability depending on the time of year. But there's 3 secrets to grass-fed beef, in my opinion. 1 is age at harvest, 2 is genetics of the animals, and 3 is good groceries all the time. So if you could figure out how to do that, you'll have a good product. And I've made tons of mistakes in this space, but one of the reasons why our brand is still here and has a great reputation is because we own 90% of the cattle or more that we harvest. And if they're not ready, we don't harvest them. We'll go to another pasture and harvest them. And we're very nomadic here in California. So like we have cattle over really an 800-mile stretch between the border of Oregon border up by Alexander's, who've been on this show, all the way down to Humboldt County and down here into the Bay Area, up into the mountains. So as things dry up here in the summertime, those cattle migrate via a truck to, like the wild animals would have migrated, 1,000 years ago to the mountains. And we have this amazing pasture between Mount Shasta and Mount Lassen that they thrive on. And then when they leave there, they go straight to harvest. So we just rotate the cattle around as we can. And then really come like November, December, those cattle are carrying the fat forward. They're fat and ready to go, honestly. In a perfect world, if we could harvest them all, that would be better for us financially. But we have retail customers that need fresh meat. So we just keep them going and we keep feeding them mostly dry forage. A lot of it's grown here on the ranch, or some of it comes, we buy it in the form of alfalfa or something coming from the Central Valley. And I mean, you can't ignore that. You can't, when we start cutting corners and maybe not feeding them a little bit of alfalfa in the summertime, our quality of product goes down. And I'm our very worst critic because I want it to be good every time. And then the other thing that's really cool about this, I don't know if any other grass-fed guys are doing this, but we grade everything at the kill plant. So we get a report that says what the back fat is, what the ribeye area is, what the marbling is, yield grade.
Just like if it was finished with grain.
Yeah, just like it was finished with grain. Right. But I pay a lady to come and do that, and then we know, first of all, and I have it's not a very sophisticated operation, but I have the head butcher put an S on the box that anything is select, and then I can take that and use it for a customer that doesn't care about quality. I'm not sending the select to Chez Panisse. I'm sending the really good stuff. Right. And realistically, we're like 90+% choice anyway, so we probably don't need to get the data, but it's just nice to have the data to be able to move the less quality product around. And then that being said, my GM, we just hired a new GM. He's awesome. We can talk about him too if you want, but I told him I saw some of the data from a couple weeks ago, and I was like, hey, there was like 10 selects in this group. I want to, looks like we harvested them too early. I want to taste the meat. So will you give me some of the meat? So he brought me 2 ribeyes that were select, and I cooked them the other night, and they were freaking delicious, even though they weren't fat, marbled, whatever. They were delicious. I'm like, okay, we could put our name on that, but it didn't look as appealing as I wanted it to. But so that was interesting.
I want to circle back to the 3 things that you mentioned before, and it was age, genetics, and I think you said groceries. So what is your age versus the standard age? You all give it more time, and that helps to develop the more robust flavor and like better fat profile, or what's the secret there?
The secret is the older they get, the easier it is to make them choice or choice plus or prime. And so
it's like finishing age.
Exactly.
Like
exactly. I use the analogy of us 3 here, Anthony playing football back in the day. You could eat like a pint of ice cream, 3 pizzas, and a 6-pack of beer and not gain any weight. Now that you're getting up in age a little bit, you're still in great shape. But like, use me as an example because I'm a little bit built. I'm like the perfect grass-fed steer now. I got a bunch of muscle. I got a bunch of muscle and a real nice fat layer, but that didn't start coming until I was like in my 30s, right? You start getting a muffin top, and it's no matter what. But it's the same with cattle. They're done growing around 18 to 24 months, and they start putting the fat on. So like in a perfect world, if I could financially do it, I'd harvest them around 28 months. Most of our cattle now are 24 to 26 months, but we dip down into 18 to 19 months on occasion, depending on where the cattle were and, you know, how they've gained and those kinds of things and what our supply chain looks like. And we always go to the fattest cattle first.
So it's slaughter age, the genetics, which you're using mostly Angus, and then good groceries. You're talking about basically good feed sources.
Good
and
grass,
them around
good grass, seasonally. Good hay, good whatever. Yeah. And the genetic people, a lot of times in the industry say, well, these genetics can do good on grass. You still have to have good grass for them to do good on grass. Like you can't, it's like you can't eat cardboard and have the genetics show for it. They have to eat good.
Yeah. It's kind of like humans, you know, it's no different than humans. Like we can have good genetics and have a shitty diet. It's not.
Who would have thought, you know, like animals need nutrition just like we do.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. And we make everything way too difficult. Go back and think, okay, what was Mother Nature thinking? This is not that complex. It's like we humans make it way more complex than it is. So,
seasonality. I know I asked you a two-parter. Yeah. Why is that so challenging? Like, why would it be more ideal to just slaughter, harvest everything one time a year, basically? Unpack it.
I mean, goes back to the Mother Nature thing. So animals get super fat in the spring and summer, and then in the wintertime, there's not as much green, high-quality forage. So they usually burn some of that fat, and then in the springtime it goes back through again. So that's the biggest challenge. Is it's very hard anywhere in America, and it's a little bit of like an elephant in the room. Is like, is it grass fed if it's you know in a 20-acre pasture eating hay, or is it not grass fed? And for me, I just try not to confuse people with the facts. We're just like totally transparent about it. Is like our cattle are out in the open all the time. They're always eating, hopefully, a living root in the ground or have access to it. But we do supplement the heck out of them in the wintertime. And it's more expensive to supplement the heck out of them in the wintertime. And when we first started this business, we would rotate them in the wintertime. And we were actually causing compaction, causing a decrease in biodiversity. Then it's almost better to sacrifice one area, let the other pastures grow. And when I use the analogy of pastures growing, I use the analogy of like a solar panel on the roof of your house. Like if the solar panel's covered with leaves, it's not going to work. And if the solar panel's out there available, it will work when the sun. So if you eat a plant down this short or you stomp it into the ground so it's mud, you're not going to do any photosynthesis. There's zero chance of photosynthesis. But if you eat it so it's 6 inches or 4 inches and you keep the cattle moving or you let it rest, it's just pumping liquid carbon into the soil, feeding the microbes. And then when you come to it, it'll bounce back. When you come to graze it, it'll bounce back a lot more quickly. That makes sense.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's pivot to, you mentioned like the start of the DTC side going, I think you said it was full, half, quarter cow. What was the evolution of that and like waiting to collect checks to today's environment where there's like custom cuts, more robust DTC system online? I don't know if you guys use Shopify or any other, partner like that, but walk us through some of that transition. And when did retail start to become a factor for your business?
It's actually really funny because it's like, you always begin with the end in mind, and we did not begin with this end in mind. And it's not ending now; it's getting more complex. But so we started quarter halves of wholes, and then the local Marin Farmers Market, the Sunday San Rafael Farmers Market, asked us to be part of the market, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm not doing farmers market. I'm never going to do that." But it's a very coveted spot. It's like hard to get into that farmer's market. And like somehow I caved said, okay, we'll do it. So that was our first USDA beef that we got harvested, and they cut it and we brought it to the market, and we sold it as USDA packaged meat. And then that market gets lots of exposure. So there was a chef from Zuni Cafe. It's like one of San Francisco's elite restaurants that's been around forever. And they came to the market. You guys will get a kick out of this, but came up and said, hey, my name's Ken. I'm with Zuni Cafe. We'd love to work with you someday. I'm like, I came home and I showed my wife the card. I'm like, who the hell is this? Zuni Cafe, like whatever. I didn't have a clue. And she goes, oh, that's like a really good restaurant. And long story short, we ended up getting in there. And so then we'd cut half a beef for the farmer's market. And no, we'd cut a whole beef a week, and we'd take whatever they didn't take to the farmer's market. And you were asking about how we distribute it. Like, I would throw a cold box of meat in the back of my pickup, drive to San Francisco, dump it off at Zuni Cafe, and drive home. And then we're like, for one delivery, and we're like, okay, this is not sustainable. We need to get a delivery van. So then we got a delivery van, a cooler delivery van. And then we got another one. And now we still try and use other people's wheels as much as possible, but we have a box van that holds 6 pallets, and we have another van that holds 3 pallets. And that's pretty much our distribution. And then we do pallets now. I didn't really answer your question, but now we go weekly. We take a whole load of cattle in a big truck to a harvesting facility in Merced. They go in on a Thursday night. Friday morning, they're harvested. Monday morning, they're cut into boxes. Wednesday morning, all that 15 pallets is back at our warehouse, and we distribute it, as boxed beef. So we've pretty much gotten away from the whole carcass business now, and we just do boxed beef. And
is that because boxed beef is higher margin now?
It's not necessarily higher margin, but it's way more easy. It's way more consistent. It's way easier. The shelf life is better. Like, we can hold some of this product for 60 days before we do something with it. And yeah, that's just better. But it's all because Loren didn't want to be in the meat business, right? It's like quarter half beef, it's paid for, it's gone. Full beef, paid for, it's gone. And we don't have to manage inventory. It's a big problem for smaller companies like ours to even know what they have in their freezer or not have in their freezer, like dollar-wise. Like, we have, sometimes we have $1 million worth of stuff in the freezer. It's like, if you lose a box, there goes your profitability, or, those kinds of things. So that's the part about it. Like, you just have to learn another business. And I really, me personally, love the ranching side of the business. And I love the consumer facing side and the brand building side and the education piece. But I don't like, once the animal's harvested until then, I don't like all those details and like knowing all of that. So we just hired a GM, Connor Hackett. He's a farm kid from up in Humboldt County. I've done business with his family for like 15 years. Real smart guy. And he's going to be the GM of the meat business. And I'm going to be the GM of the ranching business. And we're going to both work together. But they'll be separate businesses. And then that way, as we grow, if we grow, we can give portions of the business to our employees or raise capital to be part of the business to do new things or whatever. And I don't have to sell the ranch or any of that. I don't really want to sell anything, but I want to be able to give away parts of the business to get people excited about staying. And we've worked really hard to create this honest, transparent, quality business. We don't want to mess it up. And so we've always gone slow to go fast. And so this is a big deal for us to split the businesses in two this year. So we're excited about it.
Hell yeah, man. I love it. It's so fascinating. I like, part of me wishes we had the money to do like really deep dive case studies on every episode that we have, because there's so many things in like capitalization, corporate structure, strategy, team. Like, there's all these different pieces that are so compelling. Loren, I want to pivot to commercial side. We're kind of going there. We're talking about kind of market channels and developing the business. Regenerative, this term in terms of like using it on pack. I was poking around the website and I got one of the pages pulled up. You guys have like on a ground beef brick pack, regeneratively raised, and then it has like, I think, an asterisk with some copy underneath it that says cattle get a significant portion of their food from grass grown in pastures that are specifically managed to build soil health and biodiversity in order to store more carbon in the soil. You're not certified. You're very clearly regenerative, so I don't think you need to be. But I'm curious just to hear you talk to us about, like, how do you guys think about making these claims, like, to consumers? Are you kind of insulated from playing the whole game because you don't have a ton of retail exposure and it's mostly direct to consumer and you're just telling your own story? Like, how do you think about that, and how do you see this whole like regenerative claims thing on packaging?
So this, like, just full disclosure, like, I struggle a little bit with a lot of the certifications. We are GAP 4 certified. We are organic certified. We are Audubon bird friendly. We have been savory land to market in the past. We're not right now. And I'm like, why am I paying people to come out here and give a stamp of approval to say this is what we do? I just want to be first person certified. I want to, like, know you to come and see us and to trust us. And I realize that becomes a little bit more difficult when you're going into big, more corporate type businesses. So, like, if we're going to, if Whole Foods was our market, we would need more of these certifications. But we like to be agile, full, transparent, authentic. And, you know, if we have to lock the cattle up for 2 weeks, like, we want to be able to tell our customers, not, you know, not be like, oh, don't come today for the inspection because the cattle are locked up today. You know, like, there's so many games played in these certifications and lack of authenticity in many of them that I don't really like it. It doesn't feel good to me, and I don't want to pay somebody to give me a gold star to say what we're doing. So, and frankly, we haven't had to yet because we've grown doing it the way that we're doing it. Nobody's really said, hey, we're not going to do business with you because you don't have this certification, after they come and see what we're doing and whatever. So I don't know if I'm answering your question or skirting it, but we just want to focus on honesty, transparency, quality. We want to help educate people. There's so many games that are played in this space to get a label. We just figured the way that we do it is we manage everything for soil health. That's going to hopefully make the land more healthy, more biodiverse, and build more soil and create more life. Is like, that's the whole regenerative thing to me, is like, we want to create more life and do this dance that's amazing. And frankly, we haven't had to have all of the certifications. More conversations lately are we going to continue any certifications? We're just going to be Stemple Creek certified. And I think if we wanted to be a national brand, like blow it up and be in every Whole Foods, we would have to have a certification. But that's not necessarily what I want to do. I want to be a strong regional brand that's known for quality, honesty, transparency. So
I think you answered the question extremely well.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that you acknowledge that there's different business models and different goals, and certifications can play a vital role if you're trying to be a national brand, where it's harder to have that direct connection to the farm. But like you said, that's not your goal. And I admire the fact that you want to be a regional player. And, you know, one of my big goals I can't even say my goals, what I'd love to see change in the United States is more regional food systems celebrated. So, I mean, also just want to give pause and shout out to the food scene in the Bay Area for prioritizing local and, you know, people who raise food that does, you know, not just great things for nutrition and taste and flavor, but also for the environment. So that's really, really cool. You mentioned you're Audubon certified, and you had previously mentioned, like, you know, when people come and they see the birds, and I'm curious to get your perspective on, and AC is going to kill me because we're going back to like agronomics when he's trying to go commercial.
You're fine,
but like, since you started to really implement these systems 28 years ago, have you noticed a legitimate, like, return of, you know, clarity of water or more biodiversity, different birds coming back to the area? Like, what have you seen change on your land since you really started to implement these principles?
Yeah, I briefly mentioned that I'm a big hunter-gatherer, so I love to forage for mushrooms and hunt for all kinds of different wildlife. And when I was a younger child, I was around 15, my dad started fencing off the creeks and planting trees. And I was like, oh, this is not going to be good. It's going to flood. Who's going to have to fix the fence? And really, it proved me wrong. We see, so we've since multiplied that to the hundredth power. We've planted more than 10,000 trees. We fenced off 5 miles of riparian zone. And we have 55 types of migratory birds that nest on our ranch now that didn't nest there 30 years ago. So yes, it's working.
Amazing.
I see insects now that I've never seen in my life. I see birds now that I've never seen in my life. And I knew every bird back then because I had a BB gun and I was a little boy and I tried to shoot the prettiest girl, the prettiest birds, right? It was like, that's what little boys do. And now I'm like, no, don't shoot the pretty birds. But back then it was like the prettiest bird was like a trophy, you know? So I knew every bird we had, and I see lots of birds now that I never saw when I was a child. So I don't know if that answered it, but.
It does. I'm so glad I asked the question. I mean, 55 different bird species coming and nesting on your land. That's huge. That is so cool to hear.
Mm-hmm. If you build it, they will come. If you build the habitat, they will come. And now I'm working on beavers. There's no beavers in our area. And we have all these beautiful trees. I want the beavers to come and dam up the creeks and create more habitat. And half of my neighbors are like, no, don't do that. It's going to be horrible. And I'm like, we live in a droughty area. I want as much water as possible. If I make a dam myself, I'll go to jail because it's environmental, it's environmentally wrong. Right. But if a beaver makes a dam, it's applauded. So I want beavers now.
I love that goal. It reminds me, there's an incredible book called, I always talk about books, American Wolf. And it talks about the trophic cascade that happened when they reintroduced wolves in Yellowstone and how it quite literally, all these things changed, and it changed the banks of the river because the elk were no longer overgrazing because they're being forced to migrate, brought the beavers back, then the water came, then the birds returned. And I love using nature to build dams for you to keep more water. There's also a theory, a friend of mine told me about a while ago, that one of the biggest contributors to climate change that nobody talks about is the fur trade of the 1800s and the decimation of beaver populations in the American West. Because a lot of that water, to your point, was being held up by these natural dams, is now just flowing straight through to the ocean. So love the idea of getting beaver back in that area and would love to see that accomplished.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
There's such cool animals. Do they have to be reintroduced, or will they come naturally? And if so, where would they come from?
Sorry, Anthony, we're going down this back to nature thing again.
It's fine. It's fine.
We got a grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and made 26 fake beaver dams. They're called beaver dam analogs. So you create the habitat for the beavers in the creek. And now they have a reintroduction program where we can legally probably get some beavers reintroduced to the area. So we'll see.
Wow.
I have to get my neighbors to agree to it first before the Fish and Wildlife Service wants to play. But I know it's like my next project that, if you really want to, I dream a lot of times about what it was like 500 years ago before the Russians and before the Spaniards and before, and I'm obsessed with that a little bit. It's like, I want to try and replicate that within the fences that we have now and create this really cool ecosystem. So
man, I'm psyched. I want there to be beaver on your packaging. This is beef for beavers, whatever slogans we got to come up with, I think it's awesome.
Just a small beaver on top of the cow.
Yeah, degeneration.
Cow.
Cool.
I do want to ask you about working with other brands. Loren, I know you sell some product to other brands. Just unpack that for us. Is it just because you're selling all these prime cuts and you need somewhere to move the trim? Are they good economic opportunities? Is it a little bit all of the above? Is it something I haven't mentioned? What is it like working with these other brands, and why is it a value add to your business?
Yeah. So in the traditional meat company, not right now, unfortunately, but fortunately, I could say, but trim or ground beef has always been the thing that people can't move. They have no problem selling steaks and ribeyes and fillets and all that stuff. But when it comes to trim, it's really hard. We have an amazing demand for trim right now. And we basically are harvesting cows just to meet our demand for trim.
Wow.
But we have some partners some wholesale partners that will sell some beef to on a monthly basis, usually smaller amounts, but at times it's been bigger. One of them has been on your show before, Robbie with Force of Nature. We have a relationship with them that we sell them like 3,000 pounds a month, which to them is a very, very small amount, but it feels good for us to be able to keep that relationship open and working together. And I like what the company is doing. It's trying to get more meat, more good quality meat to a lot of different people. So it's fun to work with people like that. There'll be a point in the future that we can't afford to sell the trim because our demand is going to be enough to use it for ourselves. But it's been a great relationship and, so far, and we're open to working with some other brands. We have those conversations weekly, really. But it's so price sensitive for most of the brands, and we'd be better off now to just keep it and use it in our own program than to sell it to somebody else. And I know I've been following your podcast for a long time, and there's been other brands that are, from Uruguay or import meat from other countries. And it's just so much cheaper to do that than to raise it here, that it's really a challenge for some of these big brands to be able to keep an affordable price by using a domestic product. So we're in a really interesting time in the cattle industry and the beef industry and the new tariff situation that's going to come down the pipe. I feel like the live cattle market is about ready to burst, because live cattle are the highest they've ever been in history by like double. And it just doesn't
supply really down too. Like numbers are just
it just
down
doesn't feel right. But I don't believe we have a meat shortage. I think we have a cattle shortage. I think when you bring in all the other countries importing meat, we don't have a meat shortage. But when you look at just the U.S., we do have a cattle shortage and a meat shortage. So it's very interesting. It's actually a hard environment for us to navigate right now, because the prices of everything are so high. We actually buy a lot of cattle from other ranchers and finish them, or partner with them and buy them on the rail. And it's extremely high for us to be able to make our margins right now, or any margin.
I want to dig into this a little bit because it's a contemporary issue and it's fascinating to me. And I'm curious from like a ground perspective, if there's like a 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef coming in from abroad, imported, and they're going to slap a 25% tariff or whatever on that, how does that price now compare with 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef that is domestically raised?
I can't answer that because I would have to look at the spreadsheet to tell you, but I know this because I talk to meat brokers and I sell stuff occasionally to different people. And I have one meat broker that offered me grass-fed, grass-finished, organic, GAP 4, already in a package that says Stemple Creek Ranch from Australia, for $5.50 a pound. Wow. And I was like, my trim, I can't even make trim for like $6 a pound is my like break even on trim to make it with the price of cattle. And that's from, another country. I'm like, if I was in this for the short game, I would be all over that and be like, okay, yeah, let's do it, do it, and not say anything to anybody and just make money. But we're not, we don't want to be that in that space. And if we ever did go that space, we would be totally transparent about it and be like, look, we're partners with somebody in New Zealand or wherever else. I'm actually lobbying my wife to let's buy a ranch in New Zealand, and I could live there half the year and I could live here half the year. We could just it's not going over very well yet, but that'd be
good luck
sweet,
with that one, brother.
I mean, there's direct flights from SFO to Auckland. It's not far. You can pull that off.
Exactly.
Yeah. Moving the cows back and forth alive might be a challenge.
No. We would just be moving. We're not doing that, but I mean, that would be one way that I would do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting issue because part of me loves the accessibility of that pricing for just any consumer that wants to get a better meat product that's grass-fed, grass-finished. And part of me totally understands like our domestic producers need to be supported and can't compete with that price. So like what, I don't know. It's an interesting problem with probably no black and white solution there.
I say this all the time, Anthony, is that consumers vote with their dollars, and I would rather have them eat something from Australia or New Zealand that's grass-fed and grass-finished because they can afford it than something from a feedlot, down the road that's really a gross polluter. And I don't talk bad about, that's about as bad as I talk about it. I don't talk bad about the industry complex, because without the industry the way it is now, there'd be a lot of hungry people, but there's better ways to do things. And that's what we're trying to do by example.
Right. And I mean, these potential tariffs are really complicated, and there's a lot of impacts to a lot of businesses, but I always try to look for the silver linings. And if one of the silver linings could be there's an increase in demand for domestically raised 100% grass-fed, grass-finished, regeneratively raised beef, and we get to put more ruminant animals on more acreage, having a positive ecosystem benefit in the United States, that would be incredible, right?
Yeah.
That helps to solve a lot of problems. And personally, another thing I really like about your regional food system is it makes people feel connected to that positive ecosystem benefit. And I think that's really important because people want to have a positive impact for their own environment. And not to say that they don't want to help out anywhere else, but I think you get more buy-in when people know that, like, hey, I'm increasing the water holding capacity and fire resistance in my own neighborhood, in my own geography. So I think there, like I said, could be some potential benefits from these sorts of tariffs coming in this particular sector.
We're going to make it, like, we're resilient. Agriculture is resilient. Agriculturalists are resilient. Give us the rules and we'll figure it out and we'll make it. But I mean, I'm excited about some of the new things, and I'm very concerned about some of the new things. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
Loren, super appreciate all the time, everything that we've learned. It's been fascinating. I want to talk about the future. You mentioned you just split the company into two pieces. It sounds like you did that for some potential, like what you see down the road. So talk to us about what is coming in the future for Stemple Creek. Is it you're trying to get a hold of more land? Are you trying to get more animals into the system? Are you focusing more on food service? Are you trying to have a bigger distribution system in retail? What do you have planned in the next 1, 3, 5 years?
Yeah. So we hired a GM, Connor Hackett. He comes from a small ranch about 200 miles north of us, and his whole intent is to create a food system that is inclusive of other producers and similar to what we're doing now, but to be able to make this easy from harvest all the way to production to consumption, to have a really strong regional brand. So I think we're focused on the West Coast at Stemple, especially with our fresh meats. And, there's massive opportunity for us to do a lot more than what we do now. We don't have a sales team. Like, people call us and we decide if it works good. If they come visit the ranch, we almost always sell them something or work together. If they ask for a price list first, we very seldom work together for very long, sometimes short term. So I see we're going to be super agile. We don't know what this is going to be. We don't have any outside investment in our company. So we might shrink in our top end to focus on profitability and make it through this really challenging market and then grow. But both Lisa and I really care about the brand. We care about the authenticity. We've worked really hard to create this really cool thing, which we think is special. And it's going to give us more opportunity when we split it up to be able to either bring in investment to grow a certain area of the business or potentially bring in a silent partner to do something. But the most important thing is to be able to motivate our staff through ownership. So we want to give away or have them buy through an ESOP or something, a portion that we can, I'm not a young agriculturalist anymore, believe it or not. Like, everybody's like, oh, the next generation. Like, we need to be making plans right now for the next generation. I'm 50, we can't wait until they're 50 to start. Like, the 20-year-olds, like I was a 20-year-old, need to start and get all excited about it and grow it up. And so I'm excited to bring in the next group of people. I'm excited to potentially down the road take some chips off the table and pass the torch so that other people can be excited about the business and feel like it's theirs too. And then Lisa and I went through this school called Ranching for Profit that all ranchers should go through. And it's everybody laughs about it. Oh, you can't ranch and make profit. But one of the things they taught us in the school, and we've been working towards since then, was that it's not a business unless you can leave for 2 or 3 months and it still runs. And so Lisa and I have on our long-term goals that we want to be luxuries to the business so that we can be there and add value and be there every single day if we want to be, but we're not required to show up for it to run. There's systems in place, and we're getting dangerously close to that level where The team is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
They love working here. There's still challenges and there's still like visionary type stuff that we work on, but a lot of the day-to-day stuff, Connor does all that for me, and I do the ranch, which is what I love to do. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and eventually, you can do some of those big vision things from New Zealand. You don't have to be to do some of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So totally makes sense.
Hey, careful what you ask for. We'll see.
Right. Well, I love everything I'm hearing on this podcast for a variety of reasons. You keep talking about the mistakes that you've made, the things that you said you wouldn't do and end up doing, and that you're doing very well. Yeah. And in my brain, I'm putting you into this category that we've had a few times on the podcast, and I hope you take no offense to this, but it's almost like regenerative by accident. Yeah. You didn't intend to be a regenerative brand. You were trying to do what made the most economic sense for your farm, which happened to be implementing these systems to increase profitability. And I also just want to give a shout out to the consumers of the last 20 years, which I don't think we've really done before. But the fact that people are prioritizing eating this type of food is what allows this sort of stuff to happen. And it doesn't happen without the farmers wanting to do and the ranchers wanting to do it the right way and consumers. So it's sort of like both at the same time. Yeah. But it's just an inspiring story. And I really appreciate everything you've shared and everything I've been able to learn on this episode.
Cool. The only last thing I'd say about that is it's a perfect storm for us in that space because Lisa comes from no ag background and I come from major ag background. And Lisa's fingerprints are all over the success of this company. And she's the one that said, I'm like, oh, we're only doing seasonal. And she goes, no, you got to do year round. Figure it out. Like, make it happen. And so it's like, okay, challenged me to make it happen. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing year round. We wouldn't be doing half the things we're doing. But anyway, so it takes a good partner to be able to, be successful. So.
Hell yeah.
No doubt.
Shout out Lisa. Lisa.
Yeah.
Loren will take us home with our final question that we ask everybody. How do we get Regen Brands to have 50% market share by 2050?
2050, Regen Brands have 50% market share. I think the big thing is just keep educating consumers about the health benefits and the environmental health benefits and the true cost of raising these products, because consumers are going to drive the demand for all of these products. And then if we could replicate kind of like what our model's been is honesty, transparency, and quality, and make it taste good and be as affordable as possible and get the consumers to want it, then, I think we'll be there. I think we can be there before 2050.
Hell yeah. Loren, I love your optimism.
Don't tell
we're going to bring beavers back at the same time. This is a killer episode.
Exactly. Man. Don't tell me how you can't do it. Tell me how we can do it. Dream, think about how we can do it. We can for sure.
Our final five were honesty, transparency, quality, tasty, and affordability. Yeah. That's what I got out of that. I love it. Oh yeah. Nice. Loren, this has been awesome, man. Thank you so much for joining us. Kyle's going to hit us with the website. I can see him going to search and read it off, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
Okay.
Yeah, for anybody who wants to learn more or to buy some Stemple products, it's like Temple with an S in front, stemplecreek.com. Check it out. Pick up some beef or lamb or pork or chicken. And thanks for the time, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. It's been fun.
For transcripts, show notes, and more information on this episode, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also check out our YouTube channel, Regen Brands, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, the Regen Brands Weekly, and follow our Regen Brands LinkedIn page to stay in the know on all the latest news, insights, and perspectives from the world of regenerative CPG. Thanks so much for tuning into the Regen Brands podcast. We hope you learned something new in this episode, and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, your talent, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.